quite an event, and we're just getting started here. The weekend is only just begun. So without further ado, I'm going to let him dive into his talk. He's got some exciting work on a Bitcoin monument that he's going to share.
Thank you, James, for pulling us all together, bringing the whole world together around this festival. It's pretty exciting, and let's jump in and share my screen right away. One other idea I just wanted to quickly touch on was had an idea for busking for Bitcoin, and kind of fits maybe a little better with this festival with the virtual reality. My idea was to have sort of a periscope set up to where different spots around different cities globally, creating a network where people are able to go to these locations, reserve their spot. They put in their crypto code, and then they're able to busk, and then anybody around the world is able to tap into the network and send tips virtually. And that seems to be even more prevalent. Like, everybody's sitting at home in their living rooms playing for tips. So it's now starting to become even more of a reality, but hopefully we'll see more people out in the streets again. But money, it's carrying germs, and people just don't have it anymore. So that will be hopefully a new iteration to keep that art alive that I can hopefully help make happen. But right now I'm going to talk about this. One of my original ideas I had when I first learned of Bitcoin back. So Bitcoin monument, putting Bitcoin on the map. And so the original idea I pitched back in 2013 for the Bitcoin conference for a lightning talk. And I just put the little excerpt here. And I was living in Southern Illinois, which is known as Little Egypt. And so the idea I had was to build a pyramid, funding it solely with Bitcoin in Cairo, Illinois. And the logic behind that was, well, it's Little Egypt, so why not build a new monument down there? And a pyramid makes sense. And Cairo has essentially little to no economy. It's run down and poor, so you could instill this brand new economy by bringing in a bunch of Bitcoin spending and new people, new art, this new mentality. And so I laid it out that at the time, Bitcoin's total market value is $1 to $2 billion, kind of fluctuating. And the estimates to rebuild the Giza pyramid is anywhere from $250 million to $5 billion. So it was seemingly unfeasible, but today, as we're talking, it's like $180 billion market cap. So it's become slightly more of a realistic idea. And so, yeah, I'd called it a pyramid scheme, putting Bitcoin on the map. But that idea didn't get accepted, unfortunately. But this idea has been kind of burnt in the back of my brain, and it just always keeps bouncing around. And then when James asked, like, hey, do you want to present something? I was like, sure, why not? I got this idea. So some other statues that have already existed. There's a Superman statue in Southern Illinois at Metropolis, naturally. It's this Popeye statue. And then in Cairo, ironically or coincidentally, there's a statue called the Hewer, which a hewer is a miner. And Southern Illinois does have a rich history of mining, coal mining. So it's kind of a nice little coincidence. And here's where this small town lays on the confluence of the Mississippi and Ohio rivers. And just north of it is actually a small little town called Future City, which never quite took off because it always, like, when people settled back 150, 100 or 200 years ago, they thought that would be the spot. But then Chicago ended up becoming the spot for exporting all the grain that was harvested in the Midwest. So as my ideas evolved beyond just building this pyramid, I thought building a simple Satoshi Nakamoto statue. So what would that look like? And what I've come up with is just simply a statue of a person sitting at a desktop. And they're wearing a hoodie. There's no identity. You can't tell if it's a male or female. And then on the computer monitor, you'd have some of the details of the Genesis block. And then you'd have copy of the Times article, which was encoded into the Coinbase, and the block, the actual statue would be encased inside of a block. And then ideally, there would also be a power source that would have this as a Bitcoin miner, so it's actually functioning as a real life living monument supporting the network. And then beyond that, I thought, so can continue to build out these blocks to block 170. And so the first transaction that ever occurred on the network was between Satoshi and Hal Finney. And at block 170, there was the transaction of 10 Bitcoin. And so building out all these blocks would be from block 0, the Genesis block, to 170 would be about 1,000 feet. Or it'd be over 1,000 feet. So it'd be a pretty long stretch to even get it built out to this point. But it seems a little bit more feasible than trying to build a giant pyramid. So this is kind of where I've sort of reined back the idea to, okay, let's build up a Satoshi monument then, but let's try to build it out to this blockchain monument to where it's, you got the 171 blocks. And so then you can have another statue for Hal Finney, who, beyond just what he's done for Bitcoin, is very much deserving. And we can put some ALS awareness, which is what he became inflicted with, and now he's cryogenically frozen. And who knows, maybe one day he would be happy to be thawed out and see that he's being honored in just some form of fashion, because he's very deserving for the work he's done in cryptography. And so the dimensions I've come up with, so looking back, so the area of a block, I would have it as 50 cubits, where a cubit is the ancient Egyptian from the tip of your finger to the elbow. And just measuring it myself, it's 50 centimeters, coincidentally. But that is about the range that is generally given if you search online. So I just did those different measurements, and it comes out to be each edge is about 6 feet and a half an inch of each block or cube. And then just sort of laying that out, how if we were just to stretch it out beyond block 170, so we just had block 630,000 with the recent halvening. So that would extend this all the way out. So just the block feet, it would be, so it'd be over 1 million feet for the first 210,000. And then I would reduce from 50 to 25. So the size of the blockchains, like each block for each halvening, assuming it would get built out for the 200 plus miles, the blocks would get smaller and smaller, to where at 2140, when the blocks are still being produced, And if this monument is still being built upon, each individual block would then become, each edge would be, less, it would be 0.035 inches or 0.09 centimeters. It's like 9 millimeters. And so that's the idea, is like we have a starting point, the Genesis block, and then it has to build out somewhere along a linear path. So along a riverbank makes a lot of sense, because you can potentially have it stretch, for the example, from Cairo all the way down to New Orleans. And then down in New Orleans, you could have some sort of structure, museum, to where it could be built out, and to where these small blocks could then be all in one location as they are coming into existence. So then, but if we were to build up a pyramid, kind of the way I've figured it would be blocks 170, using the Halfini as one of the cornerstone blocks. And some of the other cornerstone blocks would be like the transaction for the first Bitcoin pizza. And can't remember what other ones I had within the first 210,000. But with the design I've sort of measured out, it's potentially could be 513 feet tall, which would be about 20 feet higher than the Great Pyramid of Giza. And I don't know if this would physically work. I haven't really sat down with a architect to kind of hammer out the details of this. But something that's really kind of struck me looking back at some of these new revelations and looking at Tesla's work is that the idea that the pyramids were not really tombs, but they were power generators. So it only lends itself more towards the idea of, being a real life working monument supporting the network, that we could potentially build an alternative power source that would be able to support and mine continuously going into the future, and not have to worry about, the cost of energy, if we could build up these monuments that could potentially, generate power however they were. Like, I've read theories that, so there's just little canals where they meet the 1.618 ratio, which fits musical harmonics. So there's the idea is that people simply would just have to go blow a trumpet into the Great Pyramid, and that created enough resonance, and then people had their devices that were able to tap into that, and that was enough to power their light bulbs and any other device that they may have had 5,000 plus years ago. And I think that technology is not unreasonable. And Bitcoin, the network, has still 120 years to grow. So it's not, I think it's not completely absurd to continue to think outside of the box of ways to generate power and continue to grow. So during my time in Atlanta, I was working for this company called Groundwork Atlanta, and coincidentally they had a pyramid as their logo. And one of the locations they had is this Chattahoochee brick, which used to be a brick manufacturer, but now it's just a big open space along the Chattahoochee River. And it has the dimensions that could fit the pyramid. So I thought that's a really ideal location. And besides just the size, there's also the power plant across the river that powers all of Atlanta. So as Atlanta's committed to moving the green energy, so that power, like the excess power, could potentially be bought off from that. There's also the Colonial Pipeline runs through there, so there's another potential power source. Of course, there's the river, and then there's a lot of kinetic energy with the interstate that goes right by there. So there's a lot of potential power sources that could be tapped into. So I thought that's a good ideal location for alternative or a second location for monument. And then it's like last year it was on January 3rd. I was just went into Google Street Views and I was looking at the location, and then I found first there's this billboard of advertising tackle, which I thought was sort of a coincidence considering the hodl meme, and because they have tackle spelled T-A-K-L. But then there's this truck, which is really kind of caught my eye. It says BTC on it. And so I zoomed in on it, and so BTC 413050. It's like, let's say actual Bitcoin block. And so I look it up, and that block was mined on May 23rd, 2016 at 9:35 UTC. And then I thought about, well, 1 week from today is Bitcoin Pizza Day, May 22nd. And so mine at 10 hours UTC minus 10 is Hawaii's time. So it was technically still Bitcoin Pizza Day in Hawaii at this. So now there's a weird coincidence, but I've seen like people chatting about what's real pizza, what's not. There's lots of people who don't like pineapple on their pizza. I think pizza's pizza. I will eat any type of pizza. It's, I'll eat it on a bagel. I will eat deep dish, thin crust, and almost any topping, anchovies. So, but that's getting kind of beyond the point. This is just another sort of weird coincidence, but looking further into this truck, there's also Memphis, Tennessee is where it's located, this company, which Memphis is, of course, the home of the great Bass Pro Shop Pyramid, which is along the Mississippi. And, of course, Memphis is the capital of Egypt during the Age of Pyramids. And so the final conclusion I want to just leave with today is I want to encourage anybody to, work in this idea with me, make it your own, do whatever. I would like to see multiple iterations, potentially having it just completely just decentralize this, where anybody can build their own Satoshi statue anywhere, wherever, and have it whatever size, dimensions. I don't really care to think about who Satoshi is. The idea is just to create a statue of this, cryptographer, computer scientist, and kind of move forward with how we work, what we're developing here in the world. And so, but ultimately, it's just kind of a open source project that I hope to get some help in. And if you want to help, you can contact me on Twitter at Bitcoin Monument. I just have a landing page at bitcoinmonument.org. It just links to my Twitter now. Of course, I threw up a QR code, just ways of potential funding. I don't know how to, because I wanted to be completely done with Bitcoin. But if a city wanted to give a grant or a state, I wouldn't necessarily want to refuse it. But ideally, I'd find ways to steer them into using Bitcoin, because that's the kind of the ultimate goal is to increase visibility and adoption and awareness, and just to honor this new system that was created 11 years ago. All right. So
Fantastic. I love that idea, and
thank you.
I'm curious. Maybe others have questions, but I'm wondering, why isn't there already Bitcoin monuments everywhere? And maybe there have been some created. I don't know about. But,
there's been a few. There's been a couple. I saw there's one, somebody built like an arch with old miners. I forget where that was. In Atlanta, somebody built like a giant coin out of old motherboards. And there's somebody else somewhere in Europe, I can't remember, but there's a couple chain links, and they got it installed at a Circle Drive. So I know of a few different projects that have actually come to life.
Well, certainly nothing of this magnitude and importance. I think your design speaks to the impact of Bitcoin, and it really captures a lot of the interesting characteristics of it. Super cool.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have questions? Just wanted to add, I like the idea of it kind of fading, like you have the blocks reducing in size over the full length of it.
Yeah, so
and then
I mean, it could never be fully built out, even in our lifetime, assuming that we don't become cyborgs and or whatever. But yeah, it would have to be continued on, so it cannot just be one individual, which is kind of plays into the idea, like with Satoshi, he had to hand off the project. He couldn't usher it for the life of it.
So maybe you'd have to.
So I was like, yeah,
just at one point.
Well, that's why I talk about the block size. Is that it's a different. I focus on the Coinbase as the way of, because that's a hard. Although there have been talks about changing the Coinbase, of course, but it's not arbitrary like the 1 megabyte block. That is hard encoded into the protocol.
Well, wrapping it up into a pyramid is definitely interesting. That would maybe be like polarizing on both sides of the crypto and fiat communities.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of a tongue-in-cheek.
I like it,
but it's like I'm not like, I really think that there is potentially a power, source which could lend very useful to not just Bitcoin, but to humanity, if that can be tapped into again.
Yeah, I think it should definitely be a node.
Yeah, I think that's
several.
Regardless, even if it's not actually pulling in a whole lot of hashes, it's could still be operating and supporting the network and transmitting. I had thought it can transmit up to Blockstream's satellite. It could have a radio transmission for anybody who's in the vicinity of one. That way you could maybe pop them up and have a decentralized network where it's able to relay just by a radio signal, and it could just have to space them every so many miles, however far that frequency could carry.
Maybe not to take away from the grand monument, but I'm thinking of how to decentralize it, and maybe you could have like a block in cities around the world, like everywhere could have their block of the chain or something like that.
Yeah, and let's like just bringing it into NFTs. There's like could issue out a token for each individual block that would be okay. So you're gonna build block, 439,721, and you could have a specific token for that you would get once once you build it and provide proof that you have it. You just send a picture, a geolocation data, and that could be like all tapped into that token, and it could just be sent out to whoever wants to actually participate. So it would be completely decentralized. It wouldn't be this long linear 2,000-mile long monument, but it would just be
Bitcoin.
So yeah, that's potentially somebody else had told me that idea, shared that. Michael Tidwell of Atlanta had that. I kind of like that. So that's a good way of getting it. I could maybe coordinate on website or some other way, start building momentum.
It could be a way to fund it. I like the idea of a non-fungible token for every block, and I'm sure the Bitcoin pizza block would be very rare.
It would be, a hot commodity. Who wants to? Yeah, you start bidding on which block you want to have, up front of your office or your house. Yeah, so somebody who wants to have block 420,000 or whatever block 170 would be.
Yeah, we have a question.
All right.
Somebody wants to know if you could hardwire a block's information and create a chain of physical blocks, like merging the physical and the digital, so they're actually.
That was, I mean, on each block, ideally the whole block header and like the hex code, the plain text, the zeros and ones would all be written on every single block as well. Maybe one day in the future it could be to where it could, I don't know, some other way could pull the information from the sky and just create it itself. Because I mean, like using machines and 3D printers could potentially build this out somehow.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And I mean, it's very feasible to build it. Well, maybe not very feasible because I mean, land isn't cheap in virtual reality, like the Decentraland, but it could potentially be built out in just a virtual reality environment.
Yeah. A lot of interesting directions it could go, but it's a solid plan. The idea is something that needs to happen, in my opinion. Got to honor that Satoshi, Hal or whoever they may be.
Yeah. Well, the most recent is now to add them back, which
maybe. And somebody said, let's say hypothetically, I would like to buy block number 420,000. How much is that going to set me back?
Well, I think it would have to be open auction. I don't know how much. I mean, it probably wouldn't be.
Probably $420, right? For 420 Bitcoin.
Yeah.
That one's special.
Yeah, probably about 0.069 Bitcoin.
Good answer. The market decides, right? We don't know.
Right.
Unless you're centralized in your distribution. But whatever. That's how things go sometimes, I guess.
It tends to go in that direction. I mean, that's what people tend to, crave is central authority.
Yeah.
But
well, that was really cool. I really appreciate you joining and sharing that with us. And
Yeah, I appreciate the invitation.
I'm happy to help however I
Yeah.
can, make it happen. I'm curious. I'm going to look up Bitcoin monuments after this and get an idea of what is out there. But the ones you mentioned are cool, and this one is like from a real creative standpoint, actually representing the nature of Bitcoin and the um, you know the potential to bring people together around the idea is obvious. We've got a sort of moment right now. I think we're at the virtual rare art festival because of the pandemic, and I think a lot of people are waking up to the need for trustless architecture and financial systems, and I think it can be a turning point, for Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, and pushing for something like this makes a lot of sense because it showcases how established it already is and how much it means to a lot of people. So, thanks again.